It's the Hearthstone Global Games, and next up is going to be Italy, yes, versus Spain. My name is Falcone, this is Derek Brown, and okay, I'm a little bit biased here, I'm going to be honest. Italy is, of course, one of my caster picks. I want to see them beat Spain.
Yes, but I think a lot of people in chat will be hoping that Spain will be taking this one. A very passionate crowd and group of fans for their team, and they are in with a pretty good shot of doing so, I would say. Even before we take a look at the way that picks and bans have worked out, as well as the queue order, just in terms of their roster, their teammates, the team making up Spain in the global games with, as we can see here, Akawanda, Riku97, Dalesom, and Jacob Zero. A very impressive roster.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you have to look at these two teams as two of the strongest teams in the tournament. Akawanda and Dalesom, of course, both recently appeared at Seat Story Cup alongside Turner and Meliador on Team Italy, which in itself goes to show you that they have some of the most popular players worldwide from Hearthstone, as that's sort of what Seat Story Cup is a celebration of, as we look at the Colosseum and some of the great sites in Italy.
It's making me a little bit jealous, because you and all the other UK casters got to go to Italy recently, didn't you, and cast there, and I have to say, it did look very beautiful.
It was great, it was great. We got to stay in this nice villa. We didn't get to see that much of Italy, unfortunately. Also been to Spain this year as well, which is equally beautiful a location. We have to stop using the word beautiful in these things.
Wow.
Lorinda and me were just mentioning that every time we did it. One of us would say the word beautiful by accident, and like, oops, we did it again. There have to be other words we can use.
Splendiferous.
Splendiferous. What's some splendiferous locations we have? According to the production team, we have some beautiful bands ready, so let's take a look at them.
And as we had a little look at these beforehand with the very predictable Druid, double Druid ban right at the start, we're getting the feeling that Spain, much to your chagrin, or as you would say, much to your chagrin, are a little bit the Spain are a little bit favoured coming into this one, I would say. Italy have not really got the best of the queue order, and it's kind of interesting because we've got, as we take a look later at the queue order, while it's relatively even here, some of the matchups have not worked out in Italy's favour.
Yeah, you'll see that very shortly. As far as lineups go, they are almost identical.
Yeah.
The only big difference being Italy have Taunt Warrior, Spain have Odd Warrior, which we did see a little bit of earlier this week. I spoke to Akawanda about that, and he said the reason we brought Odd Warrior is because Taunt Warrior has been our worst performing deck in the tournament so far. He said something like 40% overall. Wow. However, with a little bit of playtesting, they believe that Odd Warrior can do a lot better in the Hearthstone Global Games format. Then again, as you just saw, it's been banned. So
it has indeed, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, as we're going to take a look at the way the decks have lined up against each other in this series and who will be piloting them. Turner up against Riku97 at the start, with Odd Rogue up against Aggro Mage, and later on actually we're going to see, if we get to that point, if there's not a 3-0 sweep, a swap of that with Aggro Mage for Meliador on Italy, and the Odd Rogue for Dalesom for Spain.
Yeah, you mentioned that we had a quick look at this before we came on, and as it happens, Spain do seem to have the better end of the stick here going forwards. Yes, Odd Rogue is favoured against Aggro Mage, so Italy should win the first game, but after that things get a little bit sour, with some pretty bad matchups like Taunt Warrior versus Death Rattle Hunter, which is obviously favoured for the Hunter. How on earth do Warriors deal with cubes?
Yeah.
Just how do they do that?
That's exactly right. Pretty much any deck throughout history that's run cubes, Warrior or control variants of Warrior will always struggle with, because they don't have all too many silences, especially not in the Quest Taunt Warrior variant. Whew, that was a little bit of a tough one to say. But yeah, I think that will be a very nice way to get things going. And then even later on in the series, the even Warlock for Spain up against the odd Paladin for Italy. Not a runaway victory matchup, but definitely, I would say, putting Spain still in the driving seat.
Yeah, it's not utterly unwinnable, but Defile and Hellfire are very, very strong tools against the odd Paladin. But anyways, we are starting off the series with the odd Rogue versus the Aggro Mage. So fasten your seatbelts, because this is going to be a pretty fast game, as the odd Rogue is going to fight for the board, and the Aggro Mage is going to very quickly move on to try and deal as much face damage as possible. So we've mentioned that we think that the odd Rogue is a little bit favoured, but how does this matchup work, Derek? because thinking about it more and more, like the Rogue is going to be using the weapon to deal with these minions, and the Mage at some point is going to go, you've taken a lot of damage, Rogue.
Right.
Fireball, Frostbolt, Pyroblast.
They will try and do that. I mean, you say Pyroblast at the end. I think as soon as the Mage does start to just fire off some of these spells to face, the Rogue all of a sudden turns around and just goes cold blood, fire off everything towards the face, deadly poison on a dagger, all that good stuff, and it should, I would imagine, usually be able to close out the game a little bit quicker, because generally with the odd Rogue, I find, unless it's against an aggro deck that goes super wide on the board, like Odd Paladin or even Shaman, it should be able to do a very nice job of killing off most of the minions with its dagger.
Has to be said, though, as far as the start can go, Riku 97 with Mana Worm into Amani Berserker into Cinderstorm, he's got the 1-2-3 curve. That's about as good a start as the aggro mage can ask for. And on the other side of things, Turner's probably looking at almost a full mulligan here.
Yeah, pretty much a full mull. Like, the only one I would consider is Valspine, because Valspine on the coin is always a very powerful play to go for. But, I mean, what are you really going to be killing off on turn 4 against a Tempo Mage? An Arcane Keysmith? Like, it's pretty dire cards you're looking at getting rid of here. But as you mentioned, this is much more like it here for Turner. Something like Diamol into Coin SI7 feels like a fantastic way to kill off pretty much anything Riku can throw down. Because, again, every single minion in this deck has 3 or less health.
Yeah, as long as Turner doesn't start with Salty Deckhand Pass, I think Softel, if he's watching, would just turn off the broadcast immediately if that were to happen again. And Spain's early game, as we said before, looking pretty predictable. That's still looking like a great hand. Israel's taken down the Philippines. That's it for the Philippines, right?
That's exactly it. Lorinda's pick, the Philippines eliminated from the Hearthstone Global Games, which I'm definitely sad to see, because there's a really fantastic community spirit amongst all the Philippine members of their Global Games team. Still the exact same team as last year, I believe.
Yeah.
And I've had the chance to interact with some of them a bit, and they're a very nice group of people indeed.
They're also just one of the most fun teams to cast, because as you said, like, they're together, they've got the team spirit, they really show the emotion, you see the high fives, you see the laughs. It's a great shame. But also, given that they were one of Lorinda's picks, and they are the first caster pick to drop out of the tournament, I think that makes Lorinda the ultimate loser.
I think I would agree.
And I'm quite happy with that.
Yeah. Let's high five over how much Neil sucks. Got him. But in this particular game, it looks to me like Spain is in a decent spot for the moment, because while as we said, Turner has a very nice starting hand to be moving along with some very strong reactive options, which this deck can suffer with quite a bit, with Saucy Deckhand and SI7 Agent to immediately take out those high priority minions. Riku also has in the immediate the ability to really lock down this board. Obviously, if he wanted to, could go for Frostbolt here just to take out the Diamol, but at the same time, you know, against an odd rogue, you are always going to be facing down more threatening minions than a 1-3. If it's a Blink Fox, SI7 Agent, dare I say, a Hench Clan Thug a little bit later on, there could be some very scary stuff indeed.
Yep, and although it must have been tempting to just try and make the Mana Worm survive and use the Frostbolt aggressively like that, I guess we could decide getting as much board pressure on now while he can. Obviously, if Turner does just deal with the Mana Worm, there's still the option of pinging the Amani Berserker and dealing 5 to the face immediately, so I do agree that it's better to save that Frostbolt for those bigger threats. And now, for Italy, it's a little bit tricky. They could go Dagger, Coin, Deckhand and start to make these trades if they feel under some immediate pressure.
Wow, this is a play I find surprising. I mean, I have to be honest, most of what I was looking at on that turn while you were speaking was Coin SI7, and I was wondering, what do you target with that? Because obviously, if you kill off the Mana Worm, you are left vulnerable to an Armani Berserker, which can buff up to 5 attack.
Exactly, yeah.
Whereas if you leave up a Mana Worm, you're leaving your Diamol vulnerable to being pinged off. But then you need to say, am I even sad about that? Because you have an SI7 on board to trade against the Mana Worm. But in this scenario, Turner's saying, I don't even want to do that. I want to get in the value from this dagger while I can, because, I mean, it's an odd deck. That's why you put it in there, to make your turn 2 option always powerful, always good enough.
Well, it's worked out beautifully for Italy, as Spain didn't really have a turn 3 play. The dreaded Kirin Tormage into Secret just wasn't a thing. There was no other 2-mana minion to drop onto the board, which meant Arcane Intellect forced Riku to relinquish all control of the board.
Yeah, and it really looks to me like Riku is not going to be seizing back board control anytime soon, with not a single minion in hand. And even if he did, that would almost be better for Turner, because he could start using some of these damage abilities, like SI7 Agent and Deckhand, to clear off the minions. But yeah, as I was saying, it's just going to have to be clear, clear, clear with something like Frostbolt and Arcane Missiles, because obviously in this scenario, you just cannot afford to go for face quite yet. You need board control back.
Oh, it feels bad to use these tools to clear minions, especially against a class that isn't able to heal. Like, that's where this feels truly disastrous. But in order to survive to the point where Riku can actually kill off Turner, he's going to have to do this.
Ooh, as a lovely minion enters the hand there for Turner. This is not usually in the Vicious Fledgling the kind of card you want in this matchup, because it is an anti-control card, a card that demands a discrete answer against decks that would rather ignore the board in the first few turns and seize them back at a later point. But in this matchup, when you're up against an aggro mage who has completely lost board, it's the same position. They have to use a single removal card, which would much rather go face, which in this instance is what? Fireball? That's so bad.
Fireball on a Vicious Fledgling? No, it's fine. Just Arcane Missiles, 2 of them hits the Fledgling, job done.
It's a shame things don't work like that.
Yeah.
Perhaps if Riku were playing Toki the Time Tinkerer instead, then it might be a little bit easier.
But not like the actual minion version of the card.
No, not the card Toki.
Version
Yeah, sorry,
right.
from the Monster Hunt.
I didn't know you played Monster Hunt.
Gotta be honest, that quest is still there. I get 1 quest a day, absolute maximum.
What to do?
As is my Dungeon Run one as well. But
There you go.
Riku realizing
as
this is his only shot. That would simply have run away with the game. And now his only shot here, as he does get some pretty nice missiles, it's worth saying, is just to pray. It's to pray his opponent has the worst hand they've ever seen. Baku's in hand, double Cold Blood, double Deadly Poison, something ridiculously bad like that, which is obviously an incredibly unlikely scenario, but really their best shot here.
Would that even be that bad? The moment Italy get a minion in that case, they can just stick it to the board and start slamming a lot of damage to the face.
Yeah, but it would be better than this, where they just play a whole bunch of stuff on board.
Sure. 2 mana, get a random mage spell. Okay, sure. Not the best thing that Blink Fox could ever pick up. But it just doesn't matter too much for Turner here.
Yeah, it's mainly just the 3/3 body here. As soon as they get something to stick, they're in such a good spot. And even if it takes a little while longer to actually get something to stick on the board, Riku on the mage has now used Frostbolt, Fireball, and Arcane Missiles purely for board control. Italy can get down to a very low health total at this point, attacking in with the dagger to any minions that Spain draw, and still be in a fantastic spot.
There's definitely potential for this game to go on a little bit longer, though. Maybe it does even get to turn 10 for that Pyroblast to the face. But just the Pyroblast to the face alone isn't going to be enough. As Keysmith, finally a minion, sort of, gets drawn. And Keysmith plus Ping is looking like Riku's best shot here. I mean,
yeah.
What else do they do?
Exactly. You go for the Keysmith and you try and hit Mirror Entity, I suppose, or Frozen Clone. You just need something to play onto the board here at any cost. Maybe Explosive Runes off of it would deny a card from your opponent. There's quite a few good options here, I suppose. And again, it is really their only shot here. As I think Explosive Runes does have to be the pick here. Yep, 2 low value on counter spell, or they very possibly don't have to play a spell for the rest of the game.
And Vaporize probably hits the
useless.
Diamol anyway. And now Turner can really amp up the aggression here with the SI7 agent to play and deal with the 2/2 for free and start putting minion damage into the face. Time is running out for Riku97 and Team Spain.
Yep. But then again, this is a mage. Mage can do some disgusting things if we think back to the created by era of mage in Hearthstone through the likes of Primordial Glyph, primarily, discovering something like a Blizzard, which Italy now have, or a Flame Strike. Something could possibly occur here to pull things back, but it'd have to be a pretty miracle draw, probably involving a Luneth in some form.
I can't just borrow the Blizzard from the other side of the board.
It's not how it works.
Reach over and grab it.
No, that's what rogues do. That's not what mages do.
Ah.
Someday I'll be just like you.
It's more like what priests do, actually. Strangely enough. Okay, second Fast Slayer isn't great. It can obviously be comboed off of the Spellstone, and Turner still has control of the board here, but it's not the most aggressive Turner I've ever seen.
It's still pretty good. I mean, what do you do here? Do you take the risk that it's not counterspell with Blizzard? I don't think that's worth it. Getting a 3-4 on board would be very nice. You kind of hope it's counterspell here, because you'd rather stick the Valspine Slayer than get a random mage card.
Frostbolt, definitely one of the best mage cards, though. So
I was
I'm
just
not going to be
thinking,
complaining too much about that.
he knows it's explosive runes now, because it was a secret played from the hand.
Yep.
So he's just going with the Frostbolt. I think I like this a lot. As I mentioned earlier on, because there were so many burn cards being utilized for board control by the mage, you have this liberty. You can take a bunch of damage to your face by playing out, by using your dagger and using it to kill off minions, and get through this 6-7 damage to face every single turn.
Yeah, well, 2-turn lethal is looking like it's set up now from Turner. It's just a case of whether Riku can continue to clear this board, but if he's continuing to clear the board, then he's not dealing damage to the face again. Potentially having to use the second fireball to clear off a minion. Again, where's that primordial glyph you were talking about? A meteor, a flame strike, a blizzard. Even a dragon's fury would have a good chance at clearing this up.
That's very much the territory we're in at the moment. Or, obviously, as I mentioned, a Luneth. There's still, I don't know, if it had come up on this turn, there might have been some possibility of pulling this back. But even then, both Sorcerer's Apprentices have been played, which is a very nice combo card with a Luneth to get those spells that you draw super nice and cheap so that you can dump them out of the hand after you've drawn them.
I think it really does all come down to a good primordial glyph next turn, but Riku actually has to draw the card first.
And even then, what does that actually do? You clear off the board, they have to have a completely dead hand, which is very unlikely that they have, and they're still doing 2 damage to your face every single turn.
There's a second copy of Keystone. No, there isn't. There isn't a second copy of Keystone. Never mind. I was thinking they could Ice Barrier, getting a little bit of time.
Actually, no. I think now that I'm actually taking a look at this, the way that the mage wins isn't through Glyph, it's through burn. It's through just getting some kind of an insane sneaky victory here, where because the rogue has been taking a little bit too much damage, maybe like I was saying that Turner should be taking the damage here because it allows him to keep board control and finish off the game quicker. I still think that's probably correct in the majority of cases. But here, because both Fireballs, Frostbolt, Pyroblast, Life Drinker have all been drawn right at the top of the deck, there's a lot of damage coming through.
Right, but Spain would need to draw something next turn that they can play with the Fireball and then win with the Pyroblast the turn after. So something like Cinderstorm. Again, a lot of these burn spells, because they've already been drawn, they're not in the deck to be drawn.
Not necessarily, though. If they play Valspine here as the card, it would go down to 17 health. Fireball Ping brings them down to 10. Obviously, Turner knows exactly what that is, and he's going to be playing around these discrete breakpoints.
What? He's gone face with everything, though. See? He has gone face with everything, so now...
I mean, that play is no longer available.
No, Spain needs to clear something.
No, so Spain here can trade Fireball, Missiles, Ping face, bring their opponent down to 10, and just pray there's no lethal, which there is not.
It does require one of the missiles to go face.
It does. I mean,
Which
yes,
doesn't happen all of the time.
It's a risk, but this has to be their best shot. It's the only way of winning now. And maybe here for Turner, it was too much damage taken. He was in such a good spot, and I am just thinking back to everything I've said this game.
The first one went face. All of them
went face.
Doesn't make much of a difference. Only one needed to go face for that. But now Fireball face does set up the Pyroblast to turn lethal.
Only 2 damage needed, however, to finish off this game for Italy. And it could be Cold Blood because they have the Blizzard to counteract the counterspell. Literally any amount of damage
Deadly
here.
Poison.
Deckhand, anything here can finish off the game.
Fungal Mancer, Leroy Jenkins
will do it.
Oh my goodness.
That game ended up so much closer than I was anticipating.
So the chances were relatively high in that last turn. Again, as we started to actually list the cards that would generate 2 damage, Deadly Poison, Cold Blood, SE7 Agents, out of Deckhand, Leroy Jenkins, Fungal Mancer, etc. But still, that got mighty close, and it was cool to see Spain sort of acknowledge that, count the damage, see the 2-turn lethal, and go for it. Okay, I said to fasten your seatbelts. That got a little bit close.
It did indeed, and it was very nicely played there by Spain to look for their outs. And I do wonder there if from Italy, because of the fact they didn't have any of their accelerator cards, if you like Scalebane didn't stick on the board, they didn't have a Fungal Mancer, nothing to really turn up the damage and finish off that game quicker. They should have been a little bit more cautious to try and take less damage. But, I mean, if I was listening to myself at the start, I was saying it was good to take the damage because it solidifies their board control. A very interesting matchup there from Spain and Italy, but a good victory there, as we kind of expected for the Italians.
Let's take a look at what's coming up next. Not a good one for Team Italy. It's going to be Pool 8 on the Taunt Warrior versus Akawanda on the Death Rattle Hunter. Now, we mentioned this briefly as we went into the last game. Taunt Warrior and any Control Warrior deck really struggles to deal with these hefty Death Rattle minions like the Savannah Highmane, like the Carnivorous Cubes. So Derek, how can the Warrior actually win this one?
I mean, it's going to have to be something like less what the Warrior can draw, more what the Hunter can draw. They just have to not get some kind of an early lead through Eggs, Cubes, Highmanes, Houndmaster Shore even itself being a very powerful card there. I think if they can dodge a powerful star and get a very nice quick quest activation, maybe then they can get themselves in a scenario where they put enough damage through to the face for a surprise lethal against the Hunter. But even having said that, I find that pretty unlikely to occur because the Hunter, due to the power of tracking, sometimes Stitch Tracker, so consistent at getting those powerful early starts. They just seem to do it every time.
And one of the big weaknesses of the Warrior in this matchup is the fact that the win condition, the hero power, it can just hit an egg, it can just hit a cube, it can go everywhere but where the Warrior wants it to go. And in this matchup specifically, that causes some pretty major issues.
It does indeed. But having said that, I mean, I'm trying to come up with some kind of an optimistic...
You were going to go with, I have seen the Warrior win this matchup, and then realize, oh no, you haven't.
Yeah, I think so far in the global games, I've been very severely underwhelmed by what Taunt Warrior has been doing pretty consistently for the last couple of months. It's just been underperforming, with Race being the only player to bring it to Summer Champs and losing 0-2 straight away, and it was definitely the weakest deck in his lineup. It just hasn't been the case where you can hard target enough the aggressive decks, because obviously Taunt Warrior is fantastic against the likes of Odd Paladin in particular, Odd Rogue as well, even Shaman to an extent, because it deals with those early aggressive starts so fantastically with all those Taunt minions. But against the slower control decks like Malagos Druid, Shudderwock Shaman, and even certain decks like Control Priest, it really can just struggle to get that win condition going.
And it does show that it is one of Italy's weakest decks, actually, because looking back at the picks and bans earlier on, Taunt Warrior was their final pick.
Right.
So all of the bans had been used up, all of the other casters had been picked, and Italy sort of then went, oh, well, I guess if we have to, we will pick the Warrior, because they did have to. Whereas Spain, as I said, Akawanda said to me earlier, we don't like Taunt Warrior, it's not been performing, so we've dropped it for Odd Warrior, and it ate up the ban. So clearly that part of the strategy went very well for Spain.
It did indeed, and I've liked what I've been seeing from Odd Warrior a little bit more. It's still in a pretty good spot against the aggressive decks, and I think the fact that most people will just not really know how to play against it is one of its biggest assets. If it becomes the premier Warrior deck, all of a sudden it becomes a lot less powerful because people know exactly how many cards to draw, exactly which tech cards to stave, all that kind of stuff. Whereas if you are very proficient in the Odd Warrior, it can take matchups that it really shouldn't, like we saw yesterday when China managed to take a fantastic victory with their Odd Warrior up against a Taunt Warrior.
That was an incredible game. That all being said, the decks were revealed on Monday, so the teams have had a few days to sort of analyze what decks they're going to be up against and make sure they do understand how to play the matchups. And again, a little bit like you did yesterday, when we found out we were going to be casting Odd Warrior, you got in touch with Fury Hunter.
Yeah.
There's nothing stopping the players from doing the same thing, contacting the experts in the Hearthstone community at specific decks and seeing the little bits they can learn from them.
And that is what all of the best teams will be doing. They will be relying not only on their countrymen who have been voted into the global games, but also all of the countrymen who didn't, who are also very proficient Hearthstone players. I think we hear from the German team a lot. They rely not only on their teammates within the global games, but members of Deutsche Soccer Guild. You always hear Kolmari's name thrown about by every single German player, it feels like. And they rely on the fact that certain players know matchups better than anyone else. And why do all the hard work yourself when you can just get your mate to tell you how to do it?
Yeah. Not in the UK, though. I can't remember if that part actually made it into the interview that we showed on Monday, but Toastmaster did say to me, the other members of the UK haven't actually helped.
Right.
So some countries have been really putting their all into the Hearthstone Global Games, and Germany being one of the big ones. That's it's very nice to hear about. Just part of the Hearthstone Global Games is community spirit, national pride, all of that stuff. All of the players in the country banding together and helping make this lineup as great as possible. Even if the other players can't actually compete in the tournament, there's no reason they can't help.
And that is going to be more important than ever moving on to the next week
Yeah.
of the Global Games.
Oh, yeah.
When the Boomsday project comes out, some of the greatest deck builders in Hearthstone will, I'm sure, be helping their teams, whether or not they've actually been voted in. But we're finally ready to get underway with this matchup. The Taunt Warrior from Pool 8 on Italy's side up against the Egg Death Rattle Hunter from Akawanda on Spain's side. And as we said, even with a pretty mediocre hand like this, obviously, which you're going to be getting rid of pretty much every card here, it's still feeling very good. You have such a high chance of finding those key cards like Egg, Terrascale Stalker, and even Cube at an early point could be very powerful.
I'm a little bit more curious about Italy's hand, actually, though, because obviously they need the quest to win the game. But what about these other two cards? They're not looking too bad at all. Just curving through taunts and getting to that quest as quickly as possible might be the way to go.
Yeah, they're really not bad. But then you need to think, how much of my deck is bad? That's one of the main benefits of Taunt Warrior, is it's so hard to draw a really bad hand because your deck is so low curve, so low value. So at the start of the game, every card is incredibly strong, which could maybe lead me to think, because you have so many early Taunt cards, you could start to look more aggressively for cards like Acolyte of Pain to cycle through your deck, a Blood Razor to activate off of that. But even then, while I said these are not the premier cards like Acolyte of Pain to start cycling, they're not bad, and it could be a lot worse. You could hit cards like Execute at the start, which don't let you get any kind of a dominance onto the board.
Bulgaria just took their first win against Denmark in the off-stream match. They are currently 1-1 in the Swiss. A little bit surprised to see Denmark actually only with a 1 win and 1 loss score and also lose the same game here. We're talking both Hoys, Crane, you know, it's a very good team across the board.
It is indeed, but I mean, anything can happen in the global games. We've seen some of the real titans already taking some big losses. France now down to 1-2, I believe, in overall series.
Nice little raptors.
And now for Italy, potentially putting themselves in a little bit of a scary spot here, because giving your opponent 3/1/1 Raptors is usually not all too scary. But if they manage to end up with a Leok on their side of the board, it does all of a sudden become a bit more of a nuisance, to say the least.
Even Huffer would allow Akawanda to clear up this 2-6 easily, but Leok is looking premium. He actually gets the Leok as well. So that cornered sentry is going goodbye, Raptors immediately. And it's not the end of the world for Italy. They can still curve into the Dark Reaper, into the Malicious Commander. They've even got another taunt now in the Sound Knight Chain Gang. But Spain have now got a handle on this board. And they're not going to be letting go of it anytime soon. Animal Companion into Huffer or Misha would allow another trade into the Dark Reaper.
They do kind of have a handle on this board, but it's not game-winning at the moment. Like, this is not the kind of hand where you go Egg into double play dead or something and you can't really lose from that scenario. This is just a decent opening hand. You played some powerful minions through Animal Companion, which is not actually in a lot of the deck list now, which is something also worth considering at this point. But Italy have also curved out perfectly. 2-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop is exactly what you're looking to do here. We could even see a malicious commander, a militia commander.
Malicious. What's so malicious about her?
She just kills Leok. That's pretty bloomin' malicious,
That is
if you
quite
ask
malicious, yeah.
But primarily a militia commander coming down here could take out the Leok, which is something to consider because that is a relatively high priority target to be removing off. But having said that, there are more even higher priority targets to clear off. For example, if they played a Houndmaster Shaw here in this scenario, you'd really, really want to go Militia Commander to clear it off in combination with one of your chain gangs. And you would also still be leaving yourself vulnerable to a flanking strike if you went with the Militia Commander, because of the way that the health totals would work after trading into the Leok.
So Italy have now drawn their Acolyte of Pain, which potentially rewards them for throwing away, or for not throwing anything away earlier, and now actually drawing card draw. So Pool 8 can, a little bit later on, maybe get the Acolyte down with some Warpaths and dig through the deck. Or maybe he just has to use the Warpath now.
Okay, I'm going to take umbrage with something you said there. This doesn't reward them for not searching for Acolyte. This is like the good scenario that occurs when you don't search for Acolyte. This is not a reward for it.
Okay.
But even so, it is a very good pickup to find at this point because Italy's hand was starting to slow down a little bit here.
You mentioned that Hellmaster Shaw is maybe more important to deal with that Militia Commander, but Pool8's hand is so lacking for actually something to do this turn. Do you think they just go for it now? Deal with Leok? No? No, that's answered my question.
So with the way that this currently works out, you cannot kill off the... you can't kill off the Acolyte of Pain without some additional resource in this scenario, because obviously only the Leok could trade into it after you take out the Chain Gang. And that's a very important thing in this scenario, because around turns 5 and 6, every point of mana for the Hunter becomes incredibly important. Like, it's very, very valuable at this point, because you want to go cube into Dark Pact. Sorry. Cube into Play Dead. I got distracted there as we appear behind Akawanda.
We're trying to do the same thing and
Give
doing
him a nice
horribly.
head scratch to relax him. Oh, there you go, mate. As we hear production giggling away in the background. Great one, guys. Very funny.
That was unexpected.
They apologise. They just couldn't help themselves.
Okay, truth be told, they actually had told us in our ears a few seconds ago we'd be live in a few moments.
They said we'd be on screen.
I think we thought that just meant they were cutting back to us in the studio. We didn't realise we were just going to appear behind the player, for sure.
Wow. But as I was saying, it's a very mana-crucial couple of turns here for Spain on the Hunter. And so getting the Acolyte of Pain down here is rewarded fairly heavily, because now in this scenario, something like double Warpath Execute works out so well for Pool8, and they are massively rewarded for this play. Very beautifully done. I think they figured out exactly when Spain didn't have the mana spare to remove stuff and capitalized on that massively.
So Derek, earlier on, would it have been better for me to say Italy were not punished by not searching for some card draw?
Yeah, they weren't punished in this scenario, yeah. But, you know, they were not rewarded.
Sure.
Because the reward would have been throwing away all their stuff and finding Acolyte off the mulligan.
Gotcha.
This is just coincidental. As all of a sudden, this is... Well, okay. This was starting to look a little bit better for Pool8 on the Warrior, because there were no massive threats ready to come down for Spain. They'd just drawn a whole bunch of cards on the last turn. Acolyte of Pain still on the board. Battle Rage still ready to go. But since the dawn of time, the bane of any kind of control warrior has been the Savannah Highmane. I think I remember watching Trump streaming years ago, it must have first been now, when I was first getting into Hearthstone, where he was throwing in Tinkmaster Overspark when no one was playing that card, just to deal with Highmane in his control warriors.
It's not a surprise at all. As you said, Savannah Highmane is just such a nuisance with these warrior decks, and when it's drawn and slammed on turn 6, that's like the Akawanda specialty, isn't it? Things are starting to look bad, guys. There's the answer. Militia Commander, though, not the worst card to at least deal with the big 6/5 body. The issue is now there's still those 3/2s on the board, thanks to that Leok, which is still there back from turn 3 when it was first played. Or was it even turn 2 it was coined out?
Yeah. But this is still a very important distinction to make, in my opinion, of what is a bad situation that's recoverable and what's a game-losing situation. Okay. This is not game-losing. This is perfectly fine here for the Warrior. They can go for a Brawl at a later date, a Scourge Lord Garrosh even, to really start sweeping up this board very efficiently. Whereas if on the following turn they had seen Cube into Play Dead on that Highmane, that is a game-losing scenario. They do not recover from that instance because it's too much damage and too much resilience on the board. So by killing this off with Militia Commander, I think they've very, very proficiently put themselves in a position where they cannot just outright lose on the next turn.
However, Spain's hand are looking like an okay backup this turn. Being able to drop the egg plays around any of the board clears that Pool8 could come up with.
That's fair.
Also, positioning becomes important because Scourge Lord Garrosh is available for Pool8 next turn.
Mind if I roll need?
Puts the Loot Hoarder on the outside, which does allow for Pool8 to deal with the 3 minions on the left. with one swing of the weapon from Garrosh without activating the egg.
Yeah, I'm looking at what he was trying to do here, because obviously if you put the egg in the middle of the minions on the left, they can attack into it, so they take less damage. But you don't really care about damage in this scenario as the hunter.
Much better to open up that egg and
Yes.
get 5/5 out of it.
Well, I mean, even then, not necessarily, because having an egg intact here allows you to go tracking into Terrascale. Actually, no, even then, no, I'm confusing myself here almost, I feel, because you want to play any kind of death rattle activating effects on a cube from here on. You don't want to play that on the egg anymore.
And
That's too low value.
Katharina's getting played next turn, right? Like, it's very difficult to justify not slamming this card on turn 8. So I do disagree with the decision to put the egg there where it is. Putting it the other side of the Leok would have made it more difficult for Italy to deal with a large percentage of this board.
Yeah, I'll agree with you there. Being able to take out the Leok as well as 2 useful minions is very important indeed. Yeah, I like this decision a lot. I think they've realized, although what you hear repeated over and over in this matchup is always kill the egg. Egg must die every single time. But that's obviously a generalization. There are no hard and fast rules in Hearthstone, pretty much, apart from keep wild growth on 2.
They're going to take their time, though. They are going to think about that tracking, think about that cube, wonder if there is a reason to be doing something with the egg this turn. As Denmark tie up that series, 1-1 with Bulgaria. But Katharina just does feel like the obvious way to go here. I believe there's still a high main, the Witchwood Grizzlies. There's still King Crush in the deck somewhere. And pushing that damage now that the warrior can't armor up every turn, is even more valuable than it was before.
And obviously, if they weren't thinking about positioning on the previous turn, because Garrosh hadn't been played yet, they are most certainly doing so in this scenario, and they have put themselves in such a good position. What does Italy do against this? Every single minion on the board from their opponent is a Death Rattle minion. Where's a Defias cleaner when you need one?
I think that's a pretty good answer, though. The Phantom Militia drawn off the top there just put 3 2/4s on the board. That looks like it does a pretty good job of protecting Paul 8 for now, whilst also completing the quest. He doesn't even need to swing in the weapon this turn. Loot Hoarder on its own won't be dealing with one of these 2/4s. And yeah, the other 2 big minions do deal with 1 each, but then that's not the end of the world right now. Italy can do an okay job to stall here.
However, this is then the first turn of this game where Italy have left up an incredibly high-value target that you would love to keep as Spain. Be it the Savannah High Main or even Katharina itself would not be that bad at all to throw down the cube on. If we can take a look at the number of beasts left in the deck, there have been 2 High Mains summoned out now. There's 1 Witchwood Grizzly and King Crush left. But obviously they will be looking with the tracking, I believe, for some kind of a Death Rattle activating effect. But no matter what is done here for Spain, it's just going to be the most devastatingly powerful board at the end of this turn. If Italy could pick up another Brawl to just go double Brawl, that might be their out in this instance to start to pull things back.
King Crush on board, cube in hand. As you said, if tracking picks up one of the 2 Death Rattle activator effects, a Terrascale or a Playdead, they will have the mana to play either of them. They get the Playdead, ignoring Rexar, because this is just game-winning this turn. And it's literally game-winning this turn. It's just lethal.
Exactly. Oh yeah, as you say, it's literally lethal on board.
It is just lethal, Derek.
Wow, that was pretty absurd indeed. Akawanda giving us the thumbs up, knowing he's got the best of his opponents there in another game, going the way that we were very much expecting for it to go. A very nicely played game, I would say, there by Spain, realizing what their major strategy was of just getting those unbeatable boards, not trying to go too aggressively for damage. Some slight mispositioning we felt in the mid stages of the game. And while I liked what I saw a lot from Italy there was just not really anything they could do. Their Acolyte play, I thought, was very, very nicely spotted to give them a chance, but it just never came together.
Again, to reiterate, it's just such a favoured matchup for the Hunter. The Warrior has to work so hard to even get the quest complete, and then when the quest is complete, there's no guarantee that any of those hero powers are going to hit the face. And unlike the other matchups where, like, against a Shaman, it hits a totem, okay, it's not the end of the world, we just have to wait a turn. If it hits an egg, that's a big problem. If it hits a cube, that's a bigger problem. So the Warrior just struggles and couldn't take that in the end. Next up, we are going to have a Control Priest mirror. But to give the players a chance to get ready, we are going to go to a small break first. Don't go anywhere. More Italy versus Spain coming up. Spain just got their first win against Italy, tying up the series. It is 1-1, and we're about to go into a mirror, a Control Priest mirror, which is not a matchup we've seen much of at all in the Hearthstone Global games.
It's true, and it's very surprising to me because obviously with some of the classes we see a lot of divergence in what the archetypes brought are. With Druid you have the world's your oyster with what you want to bring, be it big, Malagos, Taunt, even you could bring some kind of a spiteful Druid, as some people have been electing to in recent tournaments. Or Token, exactly, yeah, of course. So many of them forgetting some of them. But with Priest, it's pretty much just the Control Priest that most players are going for. Obviously, a few combo Priests brought here and there, and I think there's been one Murloc Priest so far this tournament in the first week, which is, yeah, don't ask me. But it's really just the most well-brought type of priest. So to not have seen it up until this point is surprising. But now that we are here, I think it's going to be a very interesting game indeed. A very intricate matchup. And one of the more difficult ones in Hearthstone, as this is not a very easy deck to play whatsoever.
I would definitely argue that Jacobo is onto a good start here by drawing Shadow Reaper Anduin. We just had a very quick chat about this matchup before we went live again, and I believe that Anduin is a big part in winning it.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, the chip damage moving towards the end game is important. If one player can just establish board dominance, then they will probably win. But that's very difficult to do in Priest with against a deck that runs Psychic Scream, against a deck that runs these board clears like Dustbreaker. However, Shadow Reaper Anduin comes down, and then the chip damage starts coming in every turn. It doesn't take long for cards like Mind Blast in combination with Anduin to just win the game.
That's right, but it's far from being over at this point already, even though, as you pointed out, Jacob, keeping the Anduin, because of the fact that you can do a pretty surprising amount of stuff in the early game or the mid stages of this game to solidify your advantage if you can find cards like Twilight Drake, of which Italy have two. So clearly we are already seeing what the advantages of either side here are in this particular game of Hearthstone. For Spain, they've got Anduin. They've got a nice amount of draw as well, so they should be able to very easily get through to some kind of a surprise lethal in the later stages of the game. But for Italy, their advantage lies in their minion combat. They're going to be getting these Twilight Drakes to stick as aggressively as possible and hope that that chip damage, which will very quickly turn into a lot more than chip damage, can close out the game.
The issue for Italy is that they don't actually have anything to do until turn 4. They don't have a coin to cheat out the Twilight Drakes early, whereas Jacob does. They have Acolyte, they have Cleric, they have Acolyte of Pain, they have coin into Scaleworm to play before the Drakes can even think about hitting the board. So although those Drakes are going to do a lot of work, it's a little while before they can actually start doing anything at all.
There's not really all too much that Italy would be too desperate to play in the early turns, though, because there's nothing you can play that doesn't die to Duskbreaker, of which there's a decent chance that your opponent has right at the start. And there's also nothing you can play that doesn't just get value traded by a Twilight Drake at the start, up until you play your own Twilight Drake, of course. So I think, for the moment, this is a fine starting hand for Skak to be moving along with, just as long as he is able to capitalize on that. And obviously, a timely Shadow Reaper Anduin of his own would be very, very beneficial.
And there's still plenty of turns in which Skak has to draw that card before things start to get shaky. As Spain drop their Pyromancer, they're going to just take an aggressive stance this game, obviously holding back the Cleric. That can be used to draw a bunch of cards later. But this Pyromancer's on the board now, and Skak has no way of contesting it. He's got no choice but to just start eating up this damage.
However, for the moment, I don't think the damage through to face is really not what he's worried about with this Pyromancer. It's much more the pretty absurd amount of draw that Jacob could very potentially be getting from this scenario.
True.
I'm obviously talking about stuff like Cleric Coin Divine Him, if that were available to him, or even just as we see is actually available to him, Acolyte of Pain into Coin, while it probably won't come down yet, because it's very vulnerable to a Duskbreaker from his opponent, at some point will be a very scary play indeed.
I wonder if Coin Scaleworm is worth considering this turn. Obviously, it doesn't get its rush, But it's a way of putting this 5/4 minion on the board. Yeah, the Pyromancer takes 1 damage, but that shouldn't be the end of the world, and it sets up next turn for Northshire Cleric to start healing things. The Scale Worm also wouldn't be destroyed by Duskbreaker, so it's resistant to a lot of what Scat can do.
However, the main thing that you're expecting Scat to do on the following turn is Twilight Drake, against which Scale Worm really doesn't do very much at all, to be honest. And Spain are thinking they're just going to get the draw rolling right away, swapping the coin for a card here in this instance. And even though they are afraid of a Duskbreaker from their opponent, if that does come down, it's not even that bad, because it could potentially disrupt a Twilight Drake from being played. But even though it's not that bad, I still do entirely expect it to be played here off the top for Scat.
I was about to say, if Duskbreaker doesn't come down, which it didn't look like it was going to, that the Cleric plus the Divine Hymn can do some serious work next turn. As Duskbreaker does deny that, it does put Skag ahead on the board, but with the Twilight Drake pickup, Spain have 2 major options this turn. They can just value trade the 3/3 with the Scale Worm, or they can develop their Twilight Drake, which Italy should not be able to deal with.
I mean, they have 3 major options. They could also play the Duskbreaker, which is not that absurd. I mean, as the game progresses, Duskbreaker will become less and less valuable. I don't think that's what they're going to go for, because it still could be a useful card. If your opponent goes Wild Pyromancer into Cleric, into Spell, into all that kind of nonsense, it can be a nice way to deny their draw engines primarily, as we saw happened on just the last turn for Skak. And I think it's probably going to end up being the Twilight Drake in this scenario, because it is just the least vulnerable to what Italy can do, as we do see Spain throwing it down here. But it's not completely invulnerable. There is a copy of Mass Dispel in both of these decks, which could be used, obviously, to take out the major part of the Twilight Drake's health. And the fact that Scale Worm has Rush, a very quick ability, that gives Jacob the liberty to just throw down the slower minion on this turn, and then take exactly the trade he wants to with Scale Worm on a later point.
This turn's a little bit complicated. Duskbreaker, like Spain could use their Duskbreaker to deal with the other Duskbreaker, but it doesn't do enough to the Twilight Drake to really take seriously.
It's like, this turn is so nearly so absurdly good. Like, with double Northshire Cleric and Divine Favor in hand, he just kind of wants 1 more minion on board, which is very possibly why we will see a Scale Worm being developed on this turn.
He's going to go with the Duskbreaker.
Does leave you very vulnerable to, obviously, a Duskbreaker from your opponent, but now that you've seen one off the top as well, actually, no, that doesn't make any difference. You are not all too expecting to see a second one come down in this scenario.
And as it happens, Italy don't really have anything to do this turn, which will deal with Spain's board. Yeah, they can drop another Twilight Drake, but it dies to Spain's current board and leaves Spain able to continue developing their own minions next turn.
Or not necessarily even developing their minions.
Do the
we could
crazy
see
play you saw
double
before.
Cleric, heal, Divine Hymn to draw 4 cards on this turn would be very, very impressive indeed. But then obviously it begs the question, is Divine Hymn too valuable of a card? Italy have not done all too much that was that impressive this game. They haven't played Cleric, they haven't played Acolyte of Pain or Pyromancer, any of the cheap cards. So Spain could very possibly be putting up their opponent on a hand that does include cards like Alexstrasza, Anduin, and Mind Blast, at which point a Divine Hymn being saved for a defensive play rather than a card-drawing play could obviously be very impactful indeed.
I want to point out as well that this game is very important for Italy, as the rest of the series does look to be pretty favoured for Spain. So Italy need to take this win while they can.
And another thing worth pointing out is that Italy are making an incredibly risky play here by going for the Acolyte of Pain, going into turn 6 from your opponent, where Spain could just throw down the Cabal Shadow Priest and just steal it, at which point, well, then I guess at that point you can Psychic Scream.
So it's not as bad, though it's a lot of resources to throw into something which is just going to end up shuffled back into Spain's deck. And it's not like Italy have anything big to follow up a Psychic Scream with. They've got Primordial Drake, but they don't have the Anduin.
Maybe that is... Maybe this is Skak's master plan here of saying, obviously in the best case scenario, you can't kill this off in one turn, and then I draw 2 or even more cards, hopefully. And if you can steal it with the Cabal Shadow Priest, That's 4 cards I've shuffled into your deck, and 4 cards into your deck, which gets them further away from Mind Blast, Shadow Visions, and primarily Alexstrasza and Anduin, is a very, very scary proposition indeed.
But Spain aren't going to worry too much about that, as they're going to just draw as many cards as they can this turn, or draw 2 cards anyway. And there's Alexstrasza.
As now, pretty much every important card has now been found, or every key card for Jacob has been found with the Alexstrasza and the Anduin.
On the other side of the board, though, Skank has now picked up his own Shadow Reaper Anduin. Still behind on the board, so they are going to have to Psychic Scream here, which can put Spain once again on the offensive, as they can drop minions on the board first, and Italy are going to be having to clear that up before they can really do anything. Then again, if we see the Scale Worm come down here, Anduin will just deal with that, so Spain can't really play that card this turn.
That's right, the Scale Worm is kind of just going to be saying to Alexstrasza, like, can't you just turn into human form on this turn, and then I can have 1 less attack and not be killed off by Shadow Reaper Anduin, and Primordial Drake can just fly off into the volcano or something.
It's very idealistic.
Yeah. But on this turn, now that you've seen Psychic Scream, you obviously have more liberty to play out minions, because they will not be diluting your deck the majority of the time. Obviously, they could, as we see, they in fact do have another Psychic Scream in hand for Italy. But I would be very unsurprised for Spain to see something like just a full mana utilization, Scale Worm, Cleric, and Shadow Visions to look for that Mind Blast. My
only concern with that is, as I said before, it's pretty weak to Shadow Reaper Anduin, and if Italy do end up playing that next turn, they want to make the strongest play against that they can, because Shadow Reaper Anduin is such a big deal. Pick up another Mind Blast, okay. I was wondering if Cabal Shadow Priest gets played instead, because it's just the strongest board presence against Shadow Reaper Anduin. But no, they're just going to play the Cleric.
And I guess this does make sense. I mean, I was kind of looking at trying to clear out cards from the hand here, because they were at 10 cards in hand, which is a very scary prospect indeed, when you could burn some very important cards like Divine Hymn, Mind Blast, and Shadow Visions. But having said that, they're now at the point where they are very, very unlikely to be overdrawing, because Italy would have to do some kind of nonsense on this turn to make Spain draw a card. At which point, Jacob's saying, if they're doing anything other than play Shadow Reaper Anduin on this turn, we're pretty happy indeed.
But this has to be Shadow Reaper Anduin, right? Like, they could go with a big board play here. They could go Dustbreaker, Twilight Drake, and say, okay, Jacob, now you have to try and deal with this. Do you have your Psychic Scream? If so, you're giving up your turn again anyway, so we're happy with that. They don't have enough mana yet to play the Twilight Acolyte Cabal Shadow Priest combo. So there is merit to that. However, this is the card that wins the game.
Yes, exactly. And this is definitely what I was thinking that they would settle on. But there are many benefits to going for Dustbreaker Twilight Drake, not least of which is that if your opponent does have Shadow Reaper Anduin, which I think Italy will be very much expecting that Jacob does have the Shadow Reaper Anduin, because a card was kept off the mulligan and it has not been played up until this point. What else could that be? Maybe Alexstrasza? But pretty much it's going to be Shadow Reaper Anduin. At which point, if you play Dustbreaker and Twilight Drake, neither of those die. 7 damage straight to the dome, puts you in a nice position to start sneaking in some damage, because you do not have Alexstrasza yet.
As we can see, the issue now for Italy is that Spain do have Alexstrasza, and that is extremely likely to be their play next turn, as they reduce Skank's health almost down to half of what it is now. So what does Skank do here? Does he just go ping, Dustbreaker, ping, and start to deal as much damage as quickly as he can? Does he now go for the board control play? What do you think, Dak?
So now that you've seen no Psychic Screams from your opponents whatsoever, so any kind of a play on the board is going to be very vulnerable indeed to a Psychic Scream. And the thing for Italy here, and Spain will know this as well, is they don't have many threats. The Control Priest does not have many threats. One Twilight Drake has been dealt with. The other Twilight Drake is there, and outside of that, it's Alexstrasza, Primordial Drake, all of which have pretty easy answers to in the form of Twilight Acolyte into Cabal Shadow Priest.
Shadows grow short.
Or even just like ping Psychic Scream here is not the worst play in the world. It dilutes your opponent's deck a bit more, deals with one of their very powerful threats. You still have Twilight Acolyte into Cabal Shadow Priest for Alexstrasza in particular.
Okay, if Spain do just play Alexstrasza here, they have, what, 11 damage in one turn afterwards with the Mind Blast, the Cleric, and a few pings. So it's not quite the 2-turn lethal setup. Just completely taking over the board seems like a good start here. This sets up a great Alexstrasza next turn if this doesn't all get screamed back into the deck, which it probably has to.
Yeah, it very likely will be in this scenario, and I think it's a good setup because of that from Jacob, meaning they develop their board and then you go Alexstrasza, which has traditionally been the strongest way to do it. But in this scenario, taking a look at it actually, Psychic Scream does not have to happen here because you do have the possibility to go Mass Dispel, Duskbreaker, Ping, only leaving a 2-1 on the board as the one remaining minion after you ping the Cabal Shadow Priest, which really doesn't feel all too bad. But then again, having said that, shuffling 4 more minions into your opponent's deck also feels pretty good to me indeed. At which point, maybe they should have shuffled a 5th minion in as well. Northshire Cleric is not a good card at this point anymore, really, for Skak.
Yeah, that's true. It's good for an extra ping at some point, though.
That's the main reason, isn't it? It's to get 1 extra ping in at a later date.
Speaking of which, Spain actually drawing that isn't that bad, because again, they can just start pinging away. Ping, Cleric, ping, Cleric, ping.
Bing bong, bing bing bong. But I think there are some other more optimistic plays or more aggressive plays
Like
that make it, like Alexstrasza, ping, Twilight Drake, ping.
It's got to be Alexstrasza time now, surely. Like, what else are you waiting for? I guess you do
more
fear...
Mind Blasts.
More Mind Blasts, sure. I guess they also feared Skak having healing in hand, so...
Or they also fear him having Twilight Acolyte into Cabal Shadow Priest, which... Actually, no, they don't fear that so much, do they? Because they got Psychic Scream.
Yep.
So I guess the main thing is that they realize if they go for Alexstrasza and let their opponent slowly heal up turn after turn with something like, you know, Holy Fires, Divine Hymns after the Alexstrasza has been played, that's not good enough. They want to again set up the same condition where they have damage on board. Then if this is not cleared off, both Psychic Screams have been played now, then you go for the Alexstrasza. But in this scenario, the clear I was talking about on last turn is now available for Skak to completely clear off the board, which you kind of have to be very tempted to go for.
Yeah, I mean, I do like Jacob's play here as sort of a middle ground. The ping only removed armor, so it's not wasted damage when it comes to Alexstrasza. And also developing this big board should mean, in theory, an even more powerful Alexstrasza turn. But as you said, the Mass Dispel and the pings are going to get the job done here with the Duskbreaker ending up on the board. This is such a close game. Both players have 1 Mind Blast in hand. Yes, Jacob still has the Alexstrasza, but he hasn't had a chance to play it yet.
But still, from Jacob, we could see very similar plays to last time. Something like ping Twilight Drake ping or Primordial Drake ping. Set up a nicely decent-sized board here. Get an Alexstrasza on board next turn. Hit him in the face and try to close things down.
Shadow Priest would be a big draw here for Italy, though. They didn't get it. If they could just completely take the board back and force out the Psychic Scream, then it again flips over the initiatives and gives it to Italy as they get to start putting stuff on the board before Spain.
But now with 2 Divine Hymns in hand, options start to open up here for Skak as to drawing options. This is, I think, maybe the main reason why he didn't throw the Northshire Cleric into the Psychic Scream just to shuffle it into his opponent's deck, because obviously in this scenario we could see something like Northshire Cleric, Wild Pyromancer, Shadow Vision's Divine Hymn. It draws you a few cards, you're taking a fair bit of damage, but if your opponent then goes Alexstrasza on the following turn, actually, no, then you played a Divine Hymn. Yeah, because this is the scenario I was talking about, where you have to be very careful about how you utilize those hymns. Are they draw cards, or are they defensive cards to heal you back after an Alexstrasza?
Yeah, healing for 6 isn't much good when you've just taken, you know, gone down to 15 from the Alex, and then actually 11 because of the Primordial Drake on the board hitting phase. So Skak's best bet here is to just play their own Primordial Drake, contest the board, ping away Jacob so that it can't make a value trade of any kind. Second Mind Blast, that's 16 damage whenever Jacob wants it.
Which means obviously we could just see an Alexstrasza on this turn to demand a heal from his opponent, which is not that bad, because all the while you are making your opponent do 2 things at once to win the game, or to not lose on the spot, I should say, sorry, is a very powerful play, because then in that scenario they have to heal and kill off the Alexstrasza in the same turn, which all of a sudden means if you play Alexstrasza, they cannot go Twilight Acolyte into Cabal Shadow Priest. If they go Divine Him, maybe you just have too much damage on the board.
I'm very surprised by the restraint that's being shown by Spain by not playing this Alexstrasza. And worth noting now that the Cabal Shadow Priest will not be good enough to clear this, to take this Twilight Drake, because there's no dragon in hand to proc the Twilight Acolyte to lower the attack so that the Cabal can steal it.
Good point, good point.
So Spain are in a safer position maybe than they even think they are.
As now Italy's starting to think this hand just does not really do it at the moment. We need to start digging for some more options, because now the downsides of their Psychic Screams are starting to become very apparent, actually, because while Jacob hasn't been able to get through to those Mind Blasts as quickly as he might have otherwise been able to, he's had consistent threats, because threats have been shuffled into his deck.
Powered Shield is taken there just to keep this train going a little bit longer. Draw as many cards as they can.
Yeah.
But this Alexstrasza is going to hurt Italy so much next turn.
Just really trying to draw their entire deck at this point, realizing if they're going to be winning this game at all, they have to do it incredibly soon. And just the fact that they have played a Divine Him here shows how incredibly important it is for them to win quickly.
Okay, they drew the second Shadow Visions and have only drawn one Mind Blast, so that is more potential damage later on. As the third Mind Blast gets drawn from Jacob, I believe that's 19 damage total available in one turn now from them.
I believe you are correct. Which means
just
if
from
you
the hand alone.
attack, yes, if you attack through to face it brings them down to 16, attack through again brings them down to 12, which means a single Divine Hymn does not do it. A single Holy Fire does not do it.
Well, yeah, now they're just Alex, right? Alex to 12, Divine Hymn back up to 18 again, and okay, but Divine Hymn plus Holy Fire together will get Skak out of range, just.
Yes, just about. Well, assuming that they can clear off the board here.
Which they can, as long as the sequencing works
they can.
out.
They can.
Thanks to the Wild Pyromancer. So actually,
and obviously the ping as well.
Yeah.
So this is fairly easy for them to clear off the board here in this scenario. Maybe starting to sneak in a couple of pings to face, because I think even without the ping, it will be enough damage to clear off this board here. Yeah.
But it's still such an unfavored position for Skak, as well, he's taken all of this damage, and now Jacob can go ahead and maybe play one Mind Blast every turn if he wants to. One Mind Blast a turn is 9 damage every single turn consistently.
Yeah. It's just looking absolutely fantastic here for Jacob. Okay, yeah, however you want to do this, for Italy, there's a way to clear off this board. Oh no, wait, they didn't play the Divine Hymn on this turn, so they're just dead.
Right, well, that's an issue, and a little bit of a surprise as well. You know, Shadow Visions has been played.
Yes.
Italy know that it's possible for Spain to have 3 Mind Blasts, and they will know how much damage 3 Mind Blast is capable of with those hero powers. So. I am surprised to see the lack of a Divine Hymn there. I guess that was less a play to survive and more as they felt a play to win. But it wasn't going to work out, and Spain do take their second win of the series in a complete mirror match, leaving them incredibly favoured to win this whole series.
I mean, you say that was a play to win there at the end and not a play to lose. I just don't see how that's even the case in that scenario. You've just seen Alexstrasza. So how is there possibly a better scenario to play a Divine Hymn in that case?
That's true.
You are drawing 2 cards at the same time after you've killed off the Ooze. You still kill off the Alexstrasza and the Twilight Drake, and you heal up out of range of anything other than like quadruple Mind Blast, sorry, which you know is impossible because they've only played 1 Shadow Visions in that scenario. I think that was just...
All I can think is that they thought to themselves, look, there's no way we can win if they have more than 2 Mind Blasts.
I guess,
we'll go that way. But I mean, what you're saying makes sense. There's just no reason not to play the Divine Hymn. Alex had gone, etc. Yeah. So, oh well, a little bit disappointing from Italy, but let's take a look at what we have up next. It's going to get more disappointing for Italy from here, as Meliador has to play the same matchup that Riku played earlier, or rather that Turner played earlier, but the other way around. Meaning that this time it's going to be favoured for Spain. as Odd Rogue is just so good at grappling for the board against the aggro mage. We did see the mage almost win earlier. It can happen. It is surprising with the Rogue Dagger how much damage they can sort of take by accident or take in passing. Those little bits of chip damage that really do add up.
But having said that, the mage in that game came incredibly close because they went Mana Worm into the Frostbolt, into the Armani Berserker as well. It was a fantastic starting hand, and while the Rogue had a respectable starting hand, it was not the most insane one we've ever seen. There was no Hench Clan Thug, no Fungal Mancer to really start ramping up the amount of damage. So it was not the most devastating display we've seen from the Rogue. But yes, as you pointed out, Italy here really are on the back foot, having to win 2 games here in a row, both of which are pretty unfavourable.
Got to point out, though, both of these teams currently 2-0 in the Hearthstone Global Games Swiss. That is a fantastic start, again, especially considering how some of the other teams, which are much more famous, have done. So, you know, even a loss the series, it's not the end of the world. They're still in the tournament. Again, 4-2 seems to be the break point for how the teams qualify into the next phase of the tournament. So, you know, whoever loses this game, they've still got several chances before they're eliminated.
Absolutely. But being one of the very few teams to get up to 3-0 at this point, is it just China at this point who are at 2-0, or did someone join them last night?
China and Ukraine.
China and Ukraine, yes, after beating Belarus yesterday, I believe it was. Yeah. So some pretty elite teams over there at 3-0 already, and obviously putting themselves in a very, very likely position, or a very favourable position, to advance through to the top 16 later on in the Hearthstone Global Games. And for Spain, I feel like it's a really fantastic, a really great team to get to that 3-0 point. I love a lot of the members on the team. Akawander is just one of my favourite members of the Hearthstone community.
You and me both.
Exactly. He's just so friendly, always will give you a nice big hello wherever you are at a chat or whatever else you want.
I mean, the interesting thing about Spain for me this year is that they are one of the teams that has changed the most since last year. There are a lot of content creators in Spain, a lot of YouTubers, a lot of big Spanish streamers. And last year, when the Hearthstone Global Games was a big focus on that kind of thing, on content creators rather than competitive players, when it wasn't just championship points that guaranteed you a spot, it was more of a just pick and choose based on popular members of the community. The Spanish team was very, very different to what we've ended up with this year. It's a much more competitive team. I mean, for me, the fact that Akawander wasn't on the team last year was a bit of a shock, actually, and it just goes to show how popular some of these content creators in Spain are. But it's good to see that this year, with a more grizzled, competitive team, they're putting the work in. And the other thing about this game is that it's, as we're saying, 2-0, it's a happy story. Whoever wins this series is going to go away feeling really good about themselves and their chances in the Hearthstone Global Games. Unlike the next series we have coming up, which will be the USA versus Turkey, where one of the teams will be eliminated. So that's going to be more of a sad story. This is the happy story.
You are indeed correct. That is one I'm definitely going to be watching with bated breath while we are in the break room for the next series. It's going to be a very good one indeed. And I think from what we've seen from Turkey, while they do obviously have, I guess, their star player in Fujitora after winning WESG earlier on in the year, it feels like it's just such a favourable series for USA in terms of player caliber. It's just 4 very, very strong competitors indeed, whereas for Turkey, outside of Fujitora, it is 3 relatively unknown players.
It is. And as you said, winning WSG, big achievement. Fujitora has been making the rounds. He has been attending the tour stops. He's been putting a lot of work in this year, but just the USA team is just unparalleled, you know. Last week they were missing Muzzy, and the United Kingdom were a strong believer in the fact that because Muzzy's not there, they've got even more of a chance to win, and they did. But we'll have to see if they can pull it out of the bag in the next series coming up. But first, we have the remainder of Italy versus Spain. Game number 4, which is going to be the Aggro Mage versus the Odd Rogue. Aggro Mage for Italy versus Odd Rogue for Spain will be coming up any second now. We've established it's Spain favoured. Is there any way that Italy can win this?
Oh, absolutely. I think especially because of the star member of their team, Turner. He showed at the Summer Championships, although he just fell at the final hurdle, not quite qualifying through to the World Championships later on, that he is a real strong player with these aggressive styles of decks. That was him and Killen all day were the two players bringing a much more aggressive style of play to the Summer Championships. And obviously Killen had a little bit more success than Turner, but they both piloted them very well indeed, I would say. And so if you were ever going to have a player to get you through, having Turner on comms as all these players are communicating during all these games will be a massive boon. And even Meliador, you know, I'm talking about Turner as the star player. Meliador's been doing pretty well recently. A top 8 at Seat Story, even just over the weekend, is not to be scoffed at.
Something else not to be scoffed at, though, are Spain's opening hand.
Yeah.
One drop, Hench, Clown, Thug, SI7 Agent is definitely nothing to complain about. Meliador, though, he doesn't have the Mana Worm, but he does have Kirin Tormage Secret on turn 3, which is something that that Spain didn't have earlier on. As Bulgaria go 2-1 against Denmark in their 1-1 series.
That's going to be an interesting one to watch. Might be watching that on the VODs afterwards, as all off-stream matches are available on the Hearthstone Esports YouTube channel if you want to watch your native country play and they do not appear on stream for that day. But in this particular game of Hearthstone, even though, as you said, Italy, I believe, had a full keep there with the Armani Berserker, a very well-statted minion right at the start, because Dalesom has opted to open out the game with his Dire Mole for his opening gambit. It means he's in a position where he can just very happily value trade here with either a coin SI7 agent or a dagger. And I think because of that Hench Clan Thug in hand, it's going to be a pretty easy dagger on this turn. It's
a little bit awkward, though, because of the enrage on the Armani Berserker. Then it does mean either the mole dies or Spain take 5 or 3 extra damage.
Okay.
They're not going to want to take any of the face damage, so I expect to see the mole actually get killed off by this Armani Berserker here. The next turn, Kirin Tormage plus Secret can do some real work against the follow-up, which should be the Hench Clan Thug from Dalesom.
That's true, and so maybe because of that, and the fact that you know that every single minion that they're going to be playing in the next few turns pretty much has 3 health. You have several much stronger plays to go for here than killing off the Dire Mole. I think going for attacking and taking... only taking 2 damage there and killing off the Dire Mole was probably not the way to go about it, because then you're leaving yourself very vulnerable to 3 health minions. Whereas this scenario, you kind of get the best of both worlds, I suppose, where you can still kill off a 3 health minion with obviously the SI7 agent that you have on board, and you haven't taken the damage. The downside of this play, however, is that you do not have a dagger equipped going into Hench Clan Thug, whereas if we'd seen something like Coin Dagger Deadly Poison on the last turn, it would have allowed Dalesom to get this Hench Clan Thug on board here.
It's worked out so nicely.
It has worked out fantastic.
Regardless, though, he now knows that it's an explosive runes. It's not going to do anything this turn, and Spain start to push this dreaded face damage, and Italy already on the defensive here. Are they back in that position the mage ends up in, where they're going to have to Frostbolt away a minion? That doesn't look good.
It doesn't look that bad here, though. It's not the kind of situation that we saw last game, where they were just having to Frostbolt off 1 minion while half the board was still there. This is a full clear on this turn, potentially, with Frostbolt ping, if that's what they wanted to go for. But I guess they're thinking still in that scenario, they're not playing like a tempo mage there. They're playing like a control mage, which this deck does not function well at all. You need to be dealing with minions whilst you're developing something onto the board, or at the very least they're thinking, what does ping the 1/1 do?
Getting a second explosive runes means that Spain are going to really struggle to get themselves on the board here. I guess they can play around the first one by dropping the Firefly, but then they're taking 4 damage to the face, which isn't ever ideal against aggro mage. We saw how close Italy got to winning earlier with... Sorry, Spain got to winning earlier with their aggro mage because Italy took a little bit too much damage.
And so the eternal question that you face against explosive runes of, would I rather get a bigger minion on board, or would I rather take less damage? Obviously in this scenario, Dalesom will be looking at either Firefly into King Mukla, or just soaking up 1 damage and playing the Mukla first. I think in this scenario, because you don't have a dominant lead on the board whatsoever, getting that 5/5 on board is so much more important.
I agree.
Yes, you can enter a scenario where you get burned out, but you just have to be more optimistic than that. They very likely don't have enough damage to kill you before you kill them, because if you're putting a 5/5 on the board, playing Cold Blood on it on the following turn, that is a situation where you just outrace them every single time.
Right. And they are still on 22 after this, so it makes sense. They end up with the Henge Clan. It's still a big minion. It's a 4-4. It might not be a 5-5, but it's not the biggest of differences. I guess
it's a pretty big difference, this convergence in play, because you end up with -1/-1 on stats as Italy pick up the Alunith, but you also end up losing your dagger charge. And clearly Dalesom's thinking there is, I do not want to attack minions for the rest of the game. I want to send this through to face.
that's unfortunate. Italy almost being able to clear the entire board there. It doesn't happen. They drop a secret which came from a glyph. This could be anything. How does Dalesom play around this? I guess they just start by dropping Flame Elemental, but if they go Flame Elemental 3-drop, they can't dagger, but they can use the Cold Blood, so it's not bad at all.
Any kind of the minion, the secrets to trigger off a minion being played, be it obviously Mirror Entity, Explosive Runes, or Frozen Clone, you'd probably rather the Flame Elemental be played. But then again, you are entering the situation where you're afraid of burst damage then. If you go down to 16 health, and then they play a Luneth, or even if they just have a couple of burn spells, that's pretty scary all of a sudden. But even on, as another point to that, if they play a Luneth next turn and you're hitting them for 8 on this turn and then hitting them for, what, 13 on the next turn, you literally just have lethal. They cannot play a Luneth here. So this is a very nice play from Delson.
It's got to be the Arcane Keysmith. That's the only way Meliador has a hope of surviving. And what do you think they're looking for here? Vaporize? Ice Barrier? No, it's got to be Vaporize, right? If they get the Ice Barrier, that's the only...
Gotta go for it.
That's the only other one that actually saves them.
Yeah.
It just doesn't really get them anywhere.
It's not great. I will definitely agree with you there.
Banana time.
And while they worked fantastically last year for the Czech Republic, I believe they will be doing a significantly less impressive job here for Meliador, as with... Whew, now you've got 13, you are 4 damage off lethal still, I think.
Yeah. Can't dagger up.
Obviously, Daleson will be thinking, how do we lose in this scenario? If we play Fungal Mancer and they've got another Explosive Runes, they just win. If it's anything other than Vaporize or Ice Barrier, they just win. So they don't really need to worry about playing around anything other than those, I suppose.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Wow.
Bulgaria have actually taken down Denmark. Bulgaria now 2-1, Denmark 1-2 in the HGG Swiss.
That is most assuredly an upset, as you pointed out. Both of the brothers Hoy on Team Denmark were putting up what looked like a very impressive roster, and Bulgaria definitely one of the lesser respected or less renowned teams in the global games.
Choose soon.
Arcane Artificer, actually a pretty good card against Mage generally, but just not going to make any difference here whatsoever without any spell present in Spain's hand. Though they're just going to drop it for board presence. I guess there's no reason not to have a wider board. Plays around Arcane Missiles, Storm, etc.
Exactly. The more minions you have on board, the better, because with 7 mana available, Fireball Frostbolt does not win the game for Italy. They pretty much have no outs here in this scenario. No spell is mana damage efficient enough. And I think we're going to see a concede here from Italy as they do go down 2-1. Spain, the third team to go up 3-0 in the global games, putting on an absolute masterclass of Hearthstone.
Yep, fantastic performance all the way through. Can't deny that. I'm gonna be honest, a little bit disappointed here. Italy being my pick, my only pick that was undefeated so far, but it's okay. I'm sure Netherlands later on in the off-stream match will do me proud. But yeah, that was just a great series all through. Spain had the better matchups, but they did also win the mirror. So you can't argue with that. Some great play from one of the best teams in the Hearthstone Global Games.
Yeah, I liked a lot from what I saw from them there. I think if there was anything I disagreed with, it was mostly from Italy's side. Like maybe not.
All right, Derek. All right.
No,
all right.
It was. I'm trying to nitpick here to find some points that I thought could have been improved upon there. For example, not healing up. The big blunder was in the Priest, if you want to call it a blunder. The big talking point was in the Priest mirror, where they simply did not heal out of range of triple Mind Blast, which, you made a fantastic point that maybe they're saying, if they have that, we lose every time anyway. But I don't know if that was necessarily the case. Like, there was not really a position where the Divine Hymn became a lot better. That was as good as it's going to get from there on in that matchup. So you may as well just throw it down when it's healing you for 6 after an Alexstrasza and drawing you a couple of cards. But we are going to take a look back at the matchup as we reminisce about some of the times in this series that led to Italy's ultimate demise.
Started with Turner on the odd rogue, managed to take down the aggro mage. It was a favoured matchup for them. Things were looking strong, but it took a very swift turn for the worse as Akawanda managed to take the game, or take the series back by winning, again, a very favoured matchup for them in the Death Rattle Hunter versus Taunt Warrior, and continued to win the mirror, and finally the reverse of the first game that we saw. Spain taking a very convincing victory here.
Yeah, they were just looking absolutely dominant throughout here, and it's, I guess, kind of expected, you could say, that Turner was the one Italian player to take a win. They're definitely the most renowned at the moment, but I still expect to see good stuff from the rest of the Italian players going forward.
I've got great news for you, Derek. We're going to have a chat with one of our favourite players in the Hearthstone scene. It is Akawanda. Akawanda, congratulations on your victory against my pick, Italy. Just a little bit spiteful there. First, why don't you tell us a little bit about Odd Warrior? Because you mentioned to me before the series today that you brought it because Taunt Warrior hasn't been doing so well. So what was your thinking going into that?
So actually, after 2 drafts, we felt like the Taunt Warrior was one of the worst decks or performing decks for us. Even though we won last week against the Shadowcock Shaman in a crazy game. I don't know if you guys remember.
Yeah.
So the thing is, even though we won, we knew that it was a pretty bad deck for us. So we wanted to bring something different. We thought about 2 different decks, like the Rush Warrior, like Aggro Warrior, or something like more control-ish with Odd Warrior. So we decided to go for the Odd Warrior. I don't know, we checked the stats, we were thinking about it. We knew Italy was going to pick Paladin first. They are feeling really confident with all his players bringing Odd Paladin to all the ACT tour stops. So actually Quest Warrior was decent against Italy because we knew the Paladin was there. But you know, in the end, it's not only one matchup. You need to have a good deck against 5 decks, or at least some of them, in order to be a good pick for you. And yeah, we test a bit. We saw the deck being played by China last week as well. We thought, okay, if they are bringing it, we can't rely on bringing the deck ourselves. So that was our thought process, and actually it worked because it got banned.
So did a lot of other prep go into this series as well? Obviously taking on Italy at the 2-0 bracket in HGG. You're in the big leagues now.
Yeah, we are, and we are so happy, you know, because we had a bad start last year and we couldn't like get into the top. But this time, as I said in the promo video, we have chances to win it all. And being 3-0 the week before new expansions comes out, it's super good because we have time to maneuver if we mess up in 1 week with the new expansion, with the new decks, you know?
Does that mean we can expect to see some wacky decks from you next time, do you think?
I mean, we will try to bring the best decks, because obviously at the start of expansion, it's always easy to bring meme decks, but not meme, just with new cards, wacky things, weird things going on that no one expects, you know?
Yeah, and I just wanted to ask you, with you and Dalesom, as well as the couple of the Italian players at Seat Story over the weekend, I have to ask, were you giving them any trash talk or talking about the series you had coming up this week while you were there?
We were playing, do you know that football, that small football like, yes. I don't know the name in English. How's the name?
Table football.
Table football, yeah. We played a match of table football. I think they beat. Yeah, tell me.
They beat you? I was going to say, how serious did that match get? Was it very intense?
I think they beat us, but so we took a photo. We didn't trash talk too much. We respect each other. We are 2 communities that we are growing a lot in Hearthstone, particularly. Italy is like super big right now in comparison with 2 or 3 years ago. Spanish is also growing a little bit. So we are super happy to beat them. We respect them, of course, but super happy. Like, what can I say, right?
Congratulations, Akawanda. You guys are 3-0 in the Hearthstone Global Games Swiss. You're the 3rd team to make it that far. It's a big achievement, so well done.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Isn't he just great to talk to?
He is a lovely guy. We do love Akawanda.
Let's take a look back at the series that we just watched. remind ourselves how that went down. Game 1 was Italy on the Odd Rogue, and it got real darn close, with Riku setting up this 2-turn lethal ending in the Pyroblast. However, Turner did manage to pick up the 2 damage he needed. Well, actually picked up 6 damage in the form of Leroy Jenkins there, and that was enough to end the game before Riku got the chance to with the Pyroblast.
Exactly, a devastatingly close game there for Spain. They were really hoping that they could take that series, that game that they were not supposed to there, because that could have given them the chance to take this back. Because, man, Italy here, if they were not, they were never really going to be winning this game, to be perfectly honest. As you see some of the disgusting stuff that happened in this game, Italy, right from the offset, even with some very nice play in that game, did not really stand a chance. And then the real turning point I found in this series, where Spain absolutely solidified their victory before they went on to ultimately win it, was this Priest Mirror. Very nicely played game indeed. And from Skak, a little bit of a blunder at the end there that did lead to Spain taking another game.
Really, though, even if they didn't heal up, it would have been very difficult.
That's very true.
Game after that. Still no Alex Strauss has been played, and all of the Mind Blast in the world in Spain's hand. As finally, there was Spain on the Odd Rogue versus Italy on the I was going to say Odd Mage then, on the Aggro Mage. And just look at this board. This board state explains itself. It doesn't matter what secrets Italy ended up with. It was just going to be no match for the sheer damage output that the Odd Rogue is capable of doing from the board.
That's exactly right. But still, for Italy, I think they are in a very good spot in the Hearthstone Global Games. 2-1 is a great scoreline to be at. And as Akawanda pointed out, going into the Boomsday project in the next week of the Hearthstone Global Games, it's anyone's game.
Yep, 3-0 for Spain. However, 0-2 for the next 2 teams that will be playing against each other, fighting for their life in the Hearthstone Global Games. You do not want to miss this one. It's the USA versus Turkey coming up.